Keeper of the Lost Cities, EXILE, Chapter 13. Why not? It took Sophie a second to realize the question had come from her, and answer after that to decide she wasn't sorry for asking. Grady shook his head, his eyes pleading with her to drop it, but she wasn't letting him off that easy. Why don't you want to help the council? It's not that I don't want to help them, Sophie. It's just complicated. Doesn't seem complicated to me, she grumbled. Bronte laughed, a harsh, crackly sound. For once, Miss Foster and I are in agreement. I would very much like to understand what's so complicated about using your talents to serve our world. Isn't that obligation of those gifted with special abilities? Use them to aid the greater good. Grady does a tremendous service for us here at Havenfield, Alden said when Grady didn't respond. Need I remind you of how many creatures he and Adeline have successfully rehabilitated? Bronte rolled his eyes. Please, that's a job even someone talentless could do. And yet, not 5 minutes ago, you were arguing that the complexities of caring for Sylvie required special expertise. Were you not? So, which is it? Alden's voice was calm, but thin lines had crept across his face. Betraying his frustration, or was it worry? Successfully rehabilitating the rarest creature in our world is quite different from training a T-Rex to eat salad. Not only that, it's an honor and a privilege that should be given to someone worthy. I'm sure Timothy Hex wouldn't hesitate to enlist as an emissary if we called upon him to do so. No, I rather suspect that's his entire motion for offering his services in the first place, Alden said with a rueful smile. His quest for prominence is hardly a secret. His motivation for volunteering is no more selfish than Grady's refusal to be reinstated, Bronte snapped back. Selfish? You dare to claim my reasoning is selfish? Sylvie whinnied at Grady's outburst, and Sophie rushed to her side to calm her. Grady stalked toward Bronte, standing so close their noses practically touched. You know full well why I resigned, and given recent events, you should understand my objections even more. Havenfield is the best place to house Sylvie, and Sophie is the most capable person for the job. If you're too afraid of public scorn to accept that decision, then you deserve every bit of the criticism you're receiving. Transfer the Alicon to the Huskies if you wish. But I will not let you bully me into submission. Grady, please, Alden called as Grady stormed away, leaving Sophie behind with the 12 stunned councillors. Insolent fool, Bronte grumbled. I vote we relocate the Alicon immediately. Several of the councillors murmured agreement, and Sophie's heart sank. Sylvie may be driving her crazy, but the stubborn horse didn't deserve to be at the mercy of the Huskies. She could remember all too well the feel of Sylvie's terror as they jerked her around in that miserable harness. She reached up and rubbed Sylvie's nose, right where the straps had cut in. Let's not be hasty, Councillor Emery said, waiting for everyone to quiet before he continued. Can we really discount Miss Foster's connection to this creature? Sophie tried to stand tall as 12 pair of eyes turned to scrutinize her. Sure, she was young and new to the world, and still learning how to control her abilities, and currently covered in shimmering manure. But Grady and Adeline and Alden were right. She could do this, way better than the Huskies could. Orelai's quiet voice broke the silence. I think we should let Sophie try. I can feel her determination from here, as well as the bond between her and Sylvie. Those advantages are far superior to what little experience the Hesk's family may have. I agree with Orelai, Kenrick chimed in. Bronte snorted. Of course you do. To be fair, Kenrick did seem to favour the pretty blonde councillor over the others. I'm inclined to agree as well, Councillor Emery announced, motivating 3 of the councillors whom Sophie didn't know to vote in favour for her as well, which made the vote 6-6, unless someone else changed their mind. Sophie glanced at Councillor Derrick. He was studying her with his intense, almost probing stare, and after what felt like an eternity, he said, "I vote that we see what Sophie can do with this creature. If her progress isn't what it should be, we can always reassess." "So we have a majority then?" Alden sounded more relieved than pleased. "For now." Bronte turned to glare at Sophie. "We needed the alicorn to move to the sanctuary as soon as possible. If you don't make rapid progress, we'll have no choice but to turn her over to the Huskies." "I can handle it," Sophie promised. "We'll see. And be sure to tell your father we'll be monitoring your progress closely." "He's not my father." A father wouldn't refuse to help find her kidnappers, and she didn't want to be the daughter of anyone who would let Sylvie suffer at the hands of the Huskies just to avoid working for the council. But Grady wasn't callous, especially when it came to animals. There had to be something he wasn't telling her, something big. "Yes, well, I'm glad that's settled," Alden said, forcing a smile. "The councillors had been hoping for a demonstration of how you interact with Sylvie, Sophie. But I think it would be better to do that another time, perhaps when there are a few less pieces." Sophie scowled, but several of the councillors smiled as they reached for the pathfinders, and the tension that had been tangled around them seemed to ease. Even Sandor snickered. "I need to talk to you," she transmitted to Alden, not wanting to tell the entire council about the charm. "It's about the black swan." Alden didn't react to her transmissions, but he told the council, "I'm leaving right now for my next assignment, and will be away for a few days. Perhaps we can regroup then?" A tiny wink at the end told her he meant the last part for her. Part of her was relieved. Sophie wasn't sure if Alden would make her turn over the charm, and she needed to figure out the clue first. So she did another ungraceful curtsy and watched Alden and the councillors glitter away. Then she ran for her room, stripped off her soiled outfit, and jumped into a scalding shower. When all trace of sparkles and manure had been scrubbed away, she changed into fresh work clothes and rushed downstairs, vowing to make it very clear to Sylvie that there would be no more headache-inducing demands, unexpected fights, or poop-filled landings. Sophie froze when she spotted Grady sitting with Adeline at the kitchen table. "Is something wrong, Miss Foster?" Sandor asked as he swerved to avoid crashing into her. Sophie was trying to decide if she wanted to talk to Grady, but all she said was, "Just checking on Sylvie. She's finally quieted down." "Well, that's good news." Adeline motioned for Sophie to take her usual seat. Grady hid behind the official-looking scroll he was reading as Sophie sat in the chair across from him. Adeline snapped her fingers, and a golden muffin with purple splotches appeared on the table. "I made Blitzen-berry muffins. They were another of Jolie's favorite." Sophie squeezed Adeline's hand as she reached for the muffins and took a bite. The tart berries fizzed and popped on her tongue, and the cake was smooth like melted butter. "They're amazing, thank you." "Of course." Adeline turned away to wipe her eyes. Grady still hadn't said a word, and Sophie decided she was done letting him off the hook. "Are you ready to tell me why you won't help the council?" He made a sound that was more of a groan than a sigh, and set his scroll on the table. "I won't help them," he said, rubbing his temples, "because they don't want to find the kidnappers, Sophie. They want me to help them find the black swan. And you don't want to find them." It wasn't a question, but that didn't mean she understood it. "Not the way the council wants to, no. They want to reach out as allies. But if the black swan were our allies, we won't have to find them. If they were on our side, they wouldn't be hiding. They wouldn't be leaving secret messages on charm bracelets in the middle of the wandering woods, using a young, innocent girl like the pup." "Grady!" Adeline warned. "I'm sure they have a good reason for wanting to stay secret," Sophie argued when Grady stayed quiet. She looked to Adeline to back her up, but Adeline was staring at a cup of tea like it was the most fascinating thing in the entire universe. Grady crunched the edge of the scroll in his fisted hand. "Oh, I'm sure they have a reason, Sophie, and it's anything but good. They're not to be trusted." "You keep saying that, but I don't understand. They're the ones who rescued you." "Yes, I know. You keep saying that. and completely forgetting that they left you unconscious on the streets of a forbidden city with only a few clues to help you find your way back. Why didn't they bring you and Dex safely back to our world? He said he couldn't risk being discovered. Why do they have to hide? And how did they know where you were? I don't know, she mumbled, squishing a piece of a muffin into a sticky blob. The tiny berries stained her fingers purple. I don't know anything about them. No one tells me anything. You know everything you need to know. Obviously not. There has to be a reason why I'm so convinced the black swan is evil. If you want me to believe you, you need to tell me. You don't want to know, he said as he stood to leave. Sophie grabbed his arm. Actually, I do. The room seemed to hold its breath as he stared at her fingers on his skin, and his mouth formed 3 different words before he said, Fine. Ready? Adeline knocked her teacup as she stood, sending it crashing to the floor. She deserves to know. Adeline shook her head, but she didn't argue as she stepped over the mess and faced the wall of windows. Grady bent and picked up one of the larger shards of glass, staring at the jagged edges. I know we can't trust the black swan, he whispered, because the black swan murdered Johnny.